Hi, I'm Father Michael Orsi. I'm your host for Action for Life TV, that good news program with the big G for the gospel of Jesus Christ and the little g, the good things that people are doing throughout the world for the cause of life, from conception until natural death, and all those things that take place in between. Now, we are an ecumenical program, an organization that reaches out to people of every faith. We've had Muslims, born-again Muslims, Jews who are interested in the pro-life program and promoting the cause of life, not just in our country, but throughout the world. And unfortunately, I have to do something that I don't usually like to do. I have to ask you for some help. Time, talent, treasure. How can you help us? If you go to actionforlife.net, okay, actionforlife.net, you can get in touch with us. You'll make a donation, and that will keep us on the air. So thank you for listening to that. Now, we have a guest today. He's being Skyped in from the belly of the beast, Washington, D.C., where a lot of issues are discussed and are being discussed relating to pro-life. And this gentleman is rather famous. You may have heard of him. His name is David Bereit. David Bereit. And perhaps you've heard of him in relation to 40 days for life. 40 days for life. And what I'd like to do now is get David into the studio via Skype and talk to him about himself and 40 days for life and some new things that are going to be happening in his life and in the life of the pro-life movement. David. Hi.
Well, Father Orsi, thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
Oh, it's always nice to see you. We've been out on the sidewalk together. We've done radio shows together. But I want to ask you, for the sake of the audience, how did you get involved in the pro-life movement? And then later on, and the most famous part, I think, of your life, and this, I'm sure, more good things to come, 40 Days for Life. So how did you get involved?
That's a great question. I think it was all through God's incredible sense of humor. I was completely apathetic and passive on the issue of abortion for most of my life. I grew up in a wonderful Christian home, a Protestant family, went to a small Presbyterian church throughout my entire life, but I never heard abortion discussed in my church or in my home. And as a result, it just was an issue that didn't even register with me of what was happening in our country. So I guess I would describe it as I was blissfully unaware throughout my childhood and even up through high school.
Okay,
but when I graduated from high school,
I want to ask you a question. You just talked about something that you said it was never mentioned in your church.
Right.
Is this a problem today that churches are not talking about the evil of abortion?
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about it, right now, abortion is the leading cause of death in America. More lives are lost due to abortion than heart disease or cancer or AIDS or any other single cause. And it's also doing incredible spiritual damage, as we know, from those who are post-abortive, the burden it places on their life and on their soul. This is a gospel issue. I mean, Jesus, when he met sinners, he confronted them and helped them with their practical challenge of the sins they were grappling with. And we're all sinners, but we have to understand that this is a crucial issue that is a gospel issue and something that we need to be engaged in. And frankly, I don't think it's compassionate to withhold the information about the love, the healing, and the forgiveness for those who've been wounded by abortion, as well as hope and help for those who are in the midst of an unexpected pregnancy.
I want to say something here. I know you know it, but I want to speak to the pastors out there and the people that attend church. Whether it's a Christian church or whether it's even if you're Jewish or you're a Muslim, look, if your pastors are not talking about the evil of abortion, they are not good pastors. And you tell them that they better speak the truth, because it's the truth that will set you free. Okay, David, you're on.
Well, if I can just add one thought to that. A few years ago, I spoke at a pastor summit in North Dakota, and it was a bunch of pastors who had never been historically involved in the pro-life movement. And so the people who brought them together wanted to really reach their heart, and they did so by having a panel of post-abortive women share their testimonies with the pastors. And the last woman who spoke ripped their hearts wide open and had these pastors in tears and repenting for their silence on the issue of abortion, because she shared that the week before her abortion, she was sitting in the pew at her church. The week after her abortion, she was sitting in her pew at the same church. And for the 20 years after, she sat in that same pew, never heard abortion discussed, never heard about hope and healing following an abortion. And she felt that since this is the unspeakable sin, it must also then be an unforgivable sin. And she carried that burden for 2 decades. And she challenged these pastors and said, if you think you're doing people a disservice, if you think you're doing them a service by not talking about this, you're wrong. You're denying them the opportunity for healing, for reconciliation, for forgiveness.
Well, you know what I hear, Dave, you know what I hear? I hear, we don't want to offend anybody. We don't want to hurt anybody. Look, you're not offending. You're not hurting. You're telling the truth. You're healing. And you may be saving some people from a life of utter misery. So, pastors, do your duty.
Absolutely. So I think we've hit that point pretty hard. So I grew up in a home where it wasn't discussed in my church, and I would agree that was a negligent part on the church and the pastor's role there. And it wasn't until I went to college and moved to Texas to go to Texas A&M where I met my now wife, Margaret, of 25 years. And Margaret grew up in a Catholic family in Corpus Christi, Texas, and her parents used to take her and her sisters every weekend out to pray outside of local abortion facilities. And over a period of several years, they watched every one of those abortion centers go out of business because God's people showed up. So Margaret shared these stories with me, and I started to understand the crisis that was abortion, and that it was a relevant issue that we need as Christians to be engaged in. But also she shared there were things that faithful people could do to be part of the solution. And all of a sudden I started to sweat and feel like, oh no, do I have a role in this? And the answer is yes, we all have a role. So I didn't think initially that I had an immediate role because there was no abortion facility in the town where we lived, College Station, Texas. But all of that changed when in 1998 the news broke that Planned Parenthood was opening the first ever abortion facility in the history of that town. And Margaret and I went to a meeting and we began to get involved. But it was through those baby steps that God awakened in me the realization of the crisis that was abortion, how it destroyed the life of unborn children, how it wounded women and men and families, and that we as believers had a role and responsibility in doing something about it.
So you're just saying this. Let me just interject this. You're saying the first step, really, in ending abortion is to have people prayerfully protest, to show up outside an abortion clinic. And that's one of the ways we begin to close these death chambers down. And I plead with people week after week, get out there, get out there. You'd be surprised how many people notice you out there. Women that are going into the clinic and sometimes brought in there by their boyfriends and unfortunately even their husbands, they may think twice. I was outside an abortion clinic in Michigan a number of years ago. I was out there praying the rosary. The next day, some woman came to me in church and said, my daughter saw you out there and turned around. She saw you praying the rosary. So, folks, get out there, pray out in front of these dungeons of death, and you will make a difference. Now, David then went the next step, and tell us what you did next.
So the initial step was beginning to do exactly that, going out to pray outside of the facility in our town, getting involved with those who were sidewalk counseling or advocating on the sidewalk alongside those of us who were praying. And it was through that time I realized how potently powerful prayer is in that place. God tells us where two or more gather in his name, he is present in our midst. And where is his presence more urgently needed right now in our culture than outside of these places where lives are being lost, where souls are being wounded? So in praying about this and discussing this, initially we got together, there were 4 of us who got together in that local pro-life organization office, and we sat around the wooden conference table there and we just prayed for an hour and said, God, what can we do to be part of the solution of this crisis in our community? And there were 3 things that God put on our hearts, and the first thing we had that would wrap those 3 things together was the time frame of 40 days. Because we realized throughout scriptural history, God has made massive transformation in our world many times through 40-day periods. Sometimes he used the 40 days to transform his people, and then the world was transformed after that. Sometimes, like in the case of Noah on the ark, he transformed the entire world in 40-day periods. So we said we need to do something for 40 days, and the three activities that we felt we had to engage in, number one was prayer and fasting, because we know that with man we can do none of this, but with God, all things are possible. Saving lives, being a voice for the voiceless, and even closing down these places so no more children die there and no more women cry there. So prayer and fasting. Secondly, was a peaceful vigil, as you were referring to, Father Orsi, being out there 24 hours a day for 40 days outside of the Planned Parenthood Abortion Center to offer hope and help to those at risk of going in and to be a peaceful, silent witness to our community. And the third and final step was grassroots community outreach, taking this pro-life message, as you do so effectively here on Action for Life, taking this message out to our community, literally going door to door and inviting people to get involved in praying and fasting, be a part of the peaceful vigil and spreading the word. So that hour of prayer and our frustration about the lives that were being lost in our community birthed the first 40 Days for Life campaign in the fall of 2004. Over 1,000 people ended up getting involved in that local effort, and by the end of the year, abortions in that community had been reduced by 28%.
Okay, so you started off in one local area.
One town.
And then tell us how the movement began to grow, because it's all over the country now.
It's all around the world now.
So
it began to grow. When we recognized God had done something powerful, we realized to whom much is given, much is expected. If we've been blessed to have this experience, we need to share it with others. So initially, it was just working with a handful of other communities, one at a time, helping them conduct successful 40 Days for Life campaigns. But then as we saw it continuing to have the same kind of impact in these other cities, we said, what if we orchestrated this as a nationally coordinated effort? We didn't have a vision beyond the U.S., so we thought maybe a dozen or 15 cities would join together at the same time. And to our surprise, that first campaign, the national campaign in the fall of 2007, 89 cities across 33 states unified together in that effort. And since that time, it has now grown to spread literally around the world to 43 nations. More than 700 cities have participated. 750,000 volunteers have participated in 40 Days for Life campaigns. And I've been, Father Orsi, with you at some of those in Florida and other places around the country, as well as around the world. We have seen to date from that effort that began with 1 hour of prayer and a few people saying, what can I do where I live to save lives? We've now seen more than 13,000 lives saved from abortion due to 40 Days for Life campaigns, and 86 abortion facilities have closed their doors and gone out of business for good following 40 Days for Life campaigns.
Isn't that fantastic? You know, it's the old gospel story of that mustard seed. You know, this little seed, you know, this is the kingdom of God. But it grows. When it is of God, it grows. And St. Paul had that experience. You know, Gamaliel, his great rabbi teacher, said to him, to the Christians, if this is of God, he said, this is going to grow. And if it's not, it's not. But if it's of God, it will grow. And that's what I want you to keep in mind, you know, the experience of the early church, how Christianity spread everywhere, and how the mustard seed, all the birds of the air, means all the nations of the earth are going to come and flock onto the branches of that wonderful tree. So what David has done is just fantastic. He's done it by the grace and power of the Holy Spirit. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about some of his plans for the future. And then I'm going to talk, well, I hope we get to some of the issues, the legal issues of closing down Planned Parenthood. I want it closed. We'll be back. As you can imagine, producing this wonderful program, Action for Life, it costs a great deal of money. We're going to need your help. So if you would like to donate to keep this good news program on the air, please go to your computer, your cell phone, actionforlife.net. Thought for the day. A lot of people think that the religion is only for the next world. Well, it's very much for this world too. It has an impact on our daily lives. Make sure that you take time to know the candidates who are running for office and then to vote for those candidates who are pro-life.
Planned Parenthood has broken no laws.
Do you believe that anything on that form is creating an undue hardship or an intimidation or a misrepresentation to women who are being asked to consider whether or not they will donate this tissue?
That's an inappropriate statement and should not have been made on that form. I don't know who wrote it.
That's probably the biggest sticking point. One more thing my staff needs to talk about. They only have so many minutes to talk to the patients, so.
How long right now average
I would say they probably have 10 minutes.
And we're back. I'm Father Michael Orsi, your host on Action for Life, and we have with us a very lovely young lady. Her name is Micaih Bilger, and she is a staff writer for Life News, one of the great online newsletters that keeps us up with what is going on in the assaults against life, but also some of the good news, some of the good things that are happening to preserve life. You just saw we had a clip of some of the congressional investigations that are dealing with the with the consent forms, the woman signs, in order to have Planned Parenthood procure the body parts. And obviously there's a little bit of a deceit involved in those forms. So let's hear from Micaih. Tell us about the deceitful way these forms are being presented to the women.
Sure, you saw a little clip of the form on that video. The form was telling women that if they donate this fetal tissue, this form said that that fetal tissue could be used to treat and find cures for cancer, Alzheimer's, AIDS, and other diseases and ailments. Now, as far as I know, there is no cure for cancer. Nothing to laugh about, but Planned Parenthood was really misleading women on this form. And as you saw on that video from the congressional hearing, Dr. Lawrence Goldstein was the man who looked at that form and said that was misleading women. Dr. Goldstein works with Planned Parenthood and was a witness for the pro-abortion side to Congress. And he admitted to Congress that this consent form was misleading women.
Everything about Planned Parenthood is misleading. From the very beginning, it's misleading when they tell women that it's only tissue that we are removing. And if they were so honest, why would not they allow an ultrasound to be taken to show them there is a baby in that womb? They're phonies from the very beginning, and their foundress was a phony. Margaret Sanger was a phony. She was an evil woman. An evil woman. Not only was she pro-abortion, but she was in favor of genocide, killing those people who are less than perfect. So don't ever fall for Planned Parenthood's nefarious lies and those politicians that support them. Okay, now, I'm going to give you a chance now to talk about some of the good things that are happening, because you see, I get agitated here with phonies and lies and baloney. Yeah. Tell us some good things. There's some good things happening in Indiana. Tell us about that.
There are some good things, and I think the real heart of the pro-life movement is that we believe every life is valuable. Every person has value. It doesn't matter who they are, what they look like, what their abilities are or disabilities. That life is valuable. And so what Indiana noticed is that a number of babies that there's discrimination going on with babies in the womb, especially when they have disabilities. Research is showing this because of prenatal testing. Things like Down syndrome, when families find out their baby has Down syndrome, often they're choosing or even being pressured to have abortions. So Indiana, a couple of weeks ago, passed a law, and the governor signed it, saying that abortions based on genetic disabilities like Down syndrome are wrong and are prohibited. That's great. That's saying that these babies have value. Doesn't matter if they have a disability outside the womb or inside the womb, it's wrong to discriminate against them. So that's good news from Indiana. It's the second state to pass such a law.
What was the first state that did it?
Sure, North Dakota was the first
sure.
law.
Yeah.
And we actually are just hearing that Oklahoma is on its way toward being the third state to pass this law.
Okay, now what's Satan doing to overturn these laws?
There is a lot of contention in Indiana right now. There are abortion groups that are attacking Indiana's governor and legislators. There have been some big rallies from abortion activists in Indiana trying to overturn this law. It's really sad, but I think they're frightened, to be honest, because this law is bringing to light how really horrific abortion is and how it destroys lives. Now,
there's also some good news coming out of New York. Of all places, good news coming out of New York, where I believe the abortion laws protecting women from any prosecution against an abortion began way back. And I think that's the case that originally went to the Supreme Court, the New York case, wasn't it?
There's a New York case, and there was a case in Texas as well.
Okay. And tell us what's going on in New York now.
New York is following a national trend. Abortion numbers have been declining. But what's so surprising about New York is, as you said, they have a lot of, they're a pretty liberal state. They don't have a lot of pro-life laws. But in the past 7 years, their abortion rate has declined 21%.
Wow.
In the past year alone, it's been 5%.
What do you attribute that to? I mean, this is New York. I mean, I come from New York. It's a very liberal state. Way back, you know, abortion was made legal in New York, way back. And you have very, you know, pro-abortion governor there. You have a pro-abortion mayor there in the city. What's this attributed to?
I think it comes back to the pro-life movement, and that, I mean, even laws are helpful, laws make a difference, but so do pregnancy centers. There are many pregnancy centers in New York helping women, giving them information about their unborn babies. Free ultrasound so they can see their baby on an ultrasound screen. Things like diapers, help with rent, and just someone to stand by them and encourage them as they're going through their pregnancy. Education is another tool. Just sharing pictures, sharing things on the internet that help people see the humanity of the unborn child. It's so hard nowadays to escape those visual images showing babies at just 12 weeks sucking their thumbs in the womb. So it's becoming more and more clear that abortion is killing an innocent human life. And I think even people in liberal states like New York are seeing that, and the pro-abortion people can't stop that.
Planned Parenthood must close. In every location, it must close. And yet we continue to have people tell us, but they provide services for women, so many services for women. Micaih, can you talk about that? And you know, there are plenty of organizations that supply services for women.
Yes, and there's a lot of data to back that up too. Like, for example, there in Florida, I think I saw a map the other day saying that community health centers in Florida that would be getting the money that used to go to Planned Parenthood outnumber Planned Parenthood by something like, I don't know if it's 20 to 1. So there are so many places women can go to get health care that isn't abortion. Abortion is not health care.
Yeah, especially not for the baby.
And if you look at Planned Parenthood's reports, every year Planned Parenthood puts out a report showing how many abortions they do, how many things like breast cancer screenings and just all the services that they provide to women. And these reports, Planned Parenthood's own reports, have been showing that the abortion numbers are going up and up, and those other services that they like to talk about for women are going down and down. So it's really clear from Planned Parenthood's own reports, abortion is their focus.
Okay. Look, Madam Directress is, telling me we have about a minute and a half left, but I want folks to hear this. There are elections coming up in November. Okay? Elections do matter. And it's not just the presidency. Oh, that's big. That matters big time. But there's the local elections. Find out what your assembly people are interested in and what they believe in. Your state senate, your judges, all of those things. They're very important. And don't keep your mouth shut. You keep your mouth shut, it ends up like Nazi Germany, where people kept their mouth shut and they were afraid and 6 million Jews were killed. You can't have that in this country. You can't have it here. Micaih, I'm getting agitated again. Please tell everybody how to tune in to Life News. Tell them again, because it's important, an important site.
Just go to lifenews.com. Check us out every day. We have a daily newsletter. We also have a weekly newsletter that we'll email out to people. And then we're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest as well.
Great.
So
thank you.
Lifenews.com.
You're wonderful. Tell Steve Telt Fathero says hello. God bless you all. Have a good evening. Bye. We would like to thank our generous sponsors for their wonderful support. Thanks for watching. Please join us next time for Action for Life. I'm for action, and I hope you are too. I'm Father Michael Orsi. I am your host for Action for Life Television, that good news program which talks about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the big G and the little g, all the good things that people are doing to put the gospel of life into action. So please join us for the next episode of Action for Life.